you've been in this game now, the natural bodybuilding circuit, for how long?
In terms of competing, I competed, my first show was 2010. So that was nearly 14 years ago. I'd been training for about 5 or 6 years prior to that. So more or less 20 years training and about 14 years competing.
And how old are you now?
So I'm 38. I've had like sort of two bodybuilding careers. So sort of the early part was 2010 to 2014. And then I sort of had a 5-year break where I just sort of forgot about bodybuilding for a while. And then I came back in 2019. So it's kind of like two different chapters. So two slightly different approaches as well.
Let's talk about that. What drove you to step away?
Competed 2010, 2011, 2012. I did a few shows. And then 2014, I won a European title and a British title. And then I came fourth at a Worlds. And that was 2014. It was just getting a bit too much. So essentially that sort of 5 years was sort of that period of time where I kind of didn't want anything to sort of get in the way of all the stuff and just had too much going on. So I kind of forgot about it for a while. Still trained, but not really consistently. I was probably training each muscle group every other week just to keep ticking along. So I wasn't shrinking, but I wasn't progressing or anything like that. And then I sort of came back to it in 2019 when I got the itch again, so to speak.
Right. Before we dive into that itch, with the 5-year period, were you consistently training in that fashion that you described, where you were doing things every other week, where you were hitting a body part for the most part?
Yeah, pretty much. It was just a convenience thing because obviously my mind was on other things. I didn't want to commit to what I was doing, the previous sort of bodybuilding routine. So I thought it's just an experiment. So I suppose it was every muscle every sort of 10 days. So it'd be like a 3-day split. But the way it was spaced out would mean that each muscle one muscle group would get tailed onto the next week, if you see what I mean. So it would sort of slide along. And then I thought, well, I might just do 2 days a week and spread it out even further. So I did that and I just carried on doing that for a while just because it suited my lifestyle at the time. I didn't really notice any change in terms of, I maybe didn't look as full, but I didn't really notice any atrophy or anything like that. And then obviously when I came back in 2019, I sort of started to increase the frequency again. Yeah, probably quite an interesting part of it, which you probably don't hear a lot of people. I don't hear a lot of people training like with that sort of frequency. It's usually either once a week or more, multiple times a week per muscle group. So
yeah. And the fact that you were doing that for pretty much 5 years and you didn't really notice any sort of negative effects, would you say even in some cases the strength progressed because of the recovery, the additional recovery, or?
Not really, no. It was probably where I was doing it over sort of 10 days. So each muscle group every sort of 10 days, I found strength increased with that. But when I went to 14 days, it didn't really change anything. There was a bit of a spot there between 7 days and 14 days, like the 10 days, where I did find that I was getting stronger on some lifts, not all of them, not across the board, but mainly like pressing movements and stuff like that, but not across the board, I wouldn't say.
So it was really when you started spreading it out a little too far, you started to notice that, yeah, that's not really having a positive effect.
The only negative was that I would get sore for longer because obviously just wasn't training consistently. So it does take a while to recover from those sessions. You know, you probably find yourself, if you have a week off training and then you train, you're more sore for that first week back. So it was kind of like that, but every time I trained because I was having that gap. So recovery probably was worse in that respect, but obviously I had the time to recover in between anyway.
And were these workouts pretty intense though, for the most part?
Yeah, so I'd say it's all training to failure, or sort of failure in the sense of, I would say, it depends how you define failure. I would define failure as the positive part of the movement would go to failure. But then obviously, if you want to try and define true failure, you'd be obviously looking at the negative and stuff like that. So nothing like that. It was more just a positive, the concentric part of the movement to failure with good form. That's pretty much how I've always done it, but nothing beyond that really. Maybe a rest pause or something like that. But yeah, just that way.
And where did you pick up some of those habits, if you will, or habits, that style, if you will, of training? Was it more so, because I know you're from the UK and I talked to a lot of these guys, but was that inspired a little bit by the Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates, that kind of approach?
Partially. Dorian Yates was an influence. It was more, I don't know, are you familiar with the maximum overload training principles, Max OT?
Yeah, that's Jeff Willet and Skip LaCour who popularized.
Exactly. Yeah. So for anyone who's not familiar with that, it was sort of that approach I would be using. So I stayed with that approach and those principles. I just spaced it out further. It wasn't for the sake of competing. It was just to try and maintain through that period of time with that gap that I had.
So you found yourself training what, like 2 times per week during that time?
Yeah, it'd be something like a chest and triceps one week, back and biceps, and then the next week it'd be like sort of shoulders and legs, and then it'd be sort of like that. So it'd be alternate. So it'd be a 4-day split, one part of it one week and the next part the next.
And you never thought, hey, maybe a full body might be a little bit too much, maybe all in one session. I'm assuming that's why you didn't even attempt that.
Yeah, because I train at home as well. I train in sort of a garage sort of setup. So it's just more the fact that I'd be changing a lot. You obviously got to change a lot of weights and stuff like that. So I think doing a whole body when you're trying to go from a squat to a bench press, just the time it takes to load up. Maybe if I was training in a gym, I would have probably looked at something like that. But no, just from how much time it would take to set up the equipment to be doing full body stuff, I just sort of never went really towards that now.
Before we transition out of this segment, because I'm curious about this, how long did those workouts last you where you were able to maintain at 2 times per week at that frequency that you're talking about? How long would you say the workouts were from session to session?
An hour and a half. A typical session would have been like chest, bench press, incline and flat, dips, and then we'd move on to maybe triceps, do some skull crushes, some overhead extensions, and pretty much that'll be it. And maybe like 2 exercises, 3 sets, so 6 sets total for triceps. Chest, probably 6 or 7 sets. Maybe I do one of the exercises would be maybe 3 sets, but over 3 exercises, so 2, and maybe 3 on one of them.
Is that all the failure, those sets? The concentric
Yeah,
failure?
again, yeah, all concentric failure, or pretty close to it. I suppose if someone put a gun to your head and said, do another rep or whatever, you probably could. So in terms of in that moment, with that mindset of failure, I could have tried to push another rep out, but it's whether you get it or not.
Are those straight sets for the most part? Were you pyramiding up to like a top set?
No, so it was all straight sets. So it'd be something like, say, on the bench press, I would look at the time I was benching barbell. I don't really barbell bench press anymore. Let's say 140 kilos, and I'd do maybe 6 reps, and then the next set I'd maybe get 4 or 5, and then that's the exercise done. So the rep drop was slightly just because obviously the fatigue from the first set, but then I wouldn't pyramid anything like that. No, it would just be a natural decrease in reps due to cumulative fatigue from that first set.
You keep the same weight, but the reps start to fall off from set to set naturally.
Yeah, well, within the principles of the max OT training, if I thought that the next set I wouldn't be able to manage at least 4, then I'd maybe drop the weight just a little bit. Or if the first set I only got 5 and I was expecting 6, then I might think, okay, this next set I might not even get 4, so I might decrease the weight a little bit just to make sure I'm in that 4 to 6 rep range.
That's right. Max OT was, especially for the compounds, if I remember correctly, it was like 2 to 3 sets depending on the movement. There was like a sample routine that they put out on Simply Shredded. I remember there was like an article written about it. Are you familiar with the article I'm referring to, by the way? With Jeff?
I've read a lot of stuff from Jeff Willett's point of view, and I would have read it, I'm sure, at some point over the years.
Yeah. And his website, of course, if you just checked out, for the listeners at least, Jeff Willett's website, he's got like a bunch of sample routines on there, and it was
exactly.
He never spoke about pyramid sets, excluding the warm-ups, of course. Yeah, you're acclimating up to your working sets, of course, naturally you're pyramiding up. But when he got to that working weight, if you will, he'd stick with it, like you said, and then if you couldn't meet the rep range target, but maybe he had an extra set he had prescribed for that day that he wanted to do, he would just drop the load some, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
With what you were doing here, how long would you say that it took you to regain? Well, actually, you didn't really lose much, but we'll say the fullness and that type of thing that you kind of noticed. Maybe you were flatter in certain areas. Is that kind of what you noticed? Because you mentioned you didn't really notice any muscle loss from this, right?
Yeah, it was just sort of flatness, like you'd normally get if you don't train for a week or 2. You can I don't know if it's a lot of it is mental as well. So you're thinking that's because you haven't trained for a while. But I think looking back at pictures and stuff like that, I did notice a bit of a drop in fullness. That came back pretty much as soon as they increased the frequency to once every 7 days again. They pretty much just came back straight away within a couple of weeks. It was there straight away again. It must have just been the gap between sessions that was just causing a slight loss in fullness in that for that period of time. So it'd be fine, obviously, the first week, and then obviously as it got towards the sort of second week, and it'd been a while since I trained that muscle group, it's sort of just that sort of period of time. So obviously that when that was eliminated, I was kind of back to normal, I would say.
I really like this topic because obviously life's going to throw a bunch of stuff at you sometimes. Maybe you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with certain things that are going on in your life. And people think, maybe if they're new to this, they think, oh, if I can't train 5-6 days a week or even 4 days a week, I won't go. They'll completely leave it for maybe months on end too. And I'm thinking, well, with what you're describing and what I've experienced too, and you can get a lot out of 2 days. And depending on how you even arrange it, you could even potentially make progress. The difference with you were saying, was you train from home. So that kind of influenced how you were approaching things, right? In terms of just accessibility and practicality, right? Like you're over there changing plates and dumbbells. Well, you might be in the gym for too many hours trying to do multiple body parts in one session, right? Get exhausted. And, I'm thinking if you were at a public gym, those hour-and-a-half workouts probably would have been half potentially with the amount of changing plates. And because I remember the pandemic having to do that myself.
Yeah, exactly. So when I have trained in a sort of public gym, I found exactly that. The sessions are literally half because everything's pretty much set up. The plate's obviously bigger and there's not as many to load on and off, and the dumbbells are already made up, whereas at home I've got to make up the dumbbells and stuff like that. So it's a bit of an inconvenience. So yeah, I did notice when the odd time that I have training in a gym, the sessions are like done in half the time. It's like, well, what's that time?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the best of both worlds is if you had all the equipment you ever dreamed of in your own spot, and then you save a bunch of time because you don't have to wait for anything. Yeah, but that's like, that's the goal, right?
That's everyone's goal, that's everyone's dream, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So what do you have? What do you have available there? Is it mostly just free weights?
It's all free weights. So I've got a barbell that will go up to 300 kilos, pretty much. Not that I ever use it for that. Dumbbells that can go up to 75 kilos, 80 kilos maybe. A single dumbbell that could go maybe to 110 kilos. Bench that will do all the angles with, inclines. It won't do decline, but I do have dip stands. I have not recently, over the last couple of years, got a cable pulley that attached to the wall. So I've got some cable stuff I can do now. Pull-up bar as well. I've got a pull-up bar. Treadmill for cardio. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. It's just all the essential stuff, really, just to do all the basic free weight stuff. Obviously a rack as well for squats and stuff. All basic free weight things are covered in pretty much any rep range for any load that I want, really. But obviously there's a lack of or no machines. So that's obviously where I'm missing that side of things.
Is that always how you've trained, with free weights and in your own spot? Or was there a period where you did go to public gyms and, you'd experimented with that?
Yeah, no, it's always been free weights. That's why I really like the Max OT training principles, because it was all based around basic free weight moves. That was one of the reasons why I sort of gravitated towards that type of training style. So it sort of just affirmed that that was a good way to train. And it was obviously what I had available. So I thought, I'll try this approach. It wasn't a million miles away from how I was training previously anyway. But yeah, the free weight has always been just the staple, just basic free weights, dumbbells, barbells, a few bodyweight things like I said, dips, pull-ups.
What motivated you to stick with it though? What was it that made you still want to stick to it, even though you're going in twice per week, you're hitting every muscle group now once every 2 weeks? What was it that excited you still to go and do it? Or was it more just discipline? Like, hey, this got to get done. Like, I need to maintain this physique. I put a lot of work into it. Regardless of how I feel, I'm still going to go in twice a week.
Yeah, it's pretty much the latter. It was pretty much, I want to still get this done. I want to maintain what I've built over the years. I don't want to just stop training. I wanted a medium sort of ground to sort of keep ticking over. So that sort of fit best. Obviously, motivation was a bit of an issue because my head wasn't in it as such. In the sessions, I was kind of going through the motions for the most part for a lot of the time. It was just getting it done. It was just a routine. I wasn't really thinking about it a lot of the time. When the motivation does come back, that helps then, because you've been getting those sessions done when you're not feeling great, when you're not feeling motivated. So the sessions when you are feeling motivated, it makes all the difference again.
Right, of course. So was it burnout from like training and competing the years prior, or was it just complete? And we don't have to get into the details because that's your business, right? Unless you want to, of course, and you find that maybe there's something helpful there for the listeners. But the point I'm trying to get across is, was it for other life circumstances that led you to that specific 5-year period of how you approached your training?
Yeah, so a lot of it was nutritional as well. So I kind of fell into really bad eating habits when I was competing in those early years. So 2010, 2011 was fine. 2012 was fine, but I competed 3 times that year. And in that period of time between shows, I'd kind of fallen into this weird sort of eating habit of backloading all my calories to the weekend. So I ended up in a position where I was kind of eating probably 1,000 calories a day, Monday to Friday. And then I was just eating just insane amounts of food over the weekend. Essentially, it was disordered eating. And then that sort of carried on when I competed in 2014. And I guess I got to that point where I thought, right, this is taking a toll mentally. So that was part of the reason as well. Just it became a mental thing that I couldn't not do that either. I'm sure a lot of people go through this. It's probably not talked about that much. But I pretty much got into that habit of just eating a lot at the weekend, then spending the week doing the cardio, the low calories, and then again, just all out eating at the weekend and just doing it after a period of time. It just obviously, it's not a sustainable situation. That was part of the reason as well.
Got it. Yeah. So the competing side, would you say you learned quite a bit since then as far as how you approach the nutrition?
Yeah. So when I came back in 2019, I was sort of mentally focused. I'd balanced my calories again. I'd got into a mindset where, okay, I can eat, I track my macros and calories through the week and make sure that I'm at the weekend, I'm also tracking just to stop any anything like that. Just to get into a better habit again of just kind of just eating consistently day to day, rather than trying to have, it's fine to have those low calorie and high calorie days, but sometimes, you know, I know a lot of people have done this as well, where you can kind of start going overboard with it. If you start going, okay, I'll eat even less on this day, so I can eat even more on that day, especially if you're trying to balance it with life and sort of stuff like that. So you've got social events. It's easy to fall into a situation where you're eating a lot on say, for example, on a Saturday, and then you're trying to eat very little on a Sunday to try and compensate, and you can end up in that sort of routine. And that's pretty much what happened to me. So, and that made all the difference when I came back in 2019.
Nice. If I'm understanding correctly, you've broken that habit now. You're on a bit more of a consistent schedule with the eating now?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when I'm on the off season, I do sort of kind of eat more at the weekend naturally, like probably most people do anyway, but it's not like it was back to pre-2015, those earlier years. It's nothing like that. You know, back then I was sort of, at the weekends, I was sort of eating until I couldn't eat anymore, and I'd be that full that I wouldn't be able to sit comfortably. I wouldn't even be able to drink water because I was that full. So, you know, it wasn't a good space at that point in time. So obviously that's part of the reason why I needed to take a long break from bodybuilding.
Right. You mentioned Jeff Willet earlier, of course, Max OT, we were talking about that. How did you come across that specifically?
Yes, so that's something I stuck just through looking online, you know, looking through your forums and articles and stuff like that. I think I just stumbled across it there. When I was first training, it wasn't really low volume, but it wasn't high volume either. It was kind of the standard sort of 3 sets in the sort of 8 to 12 rep range. I was finding that the first exercise, so for example, chest, I would be doing sort of first set might be get 10 reps, second set, whatever, third set, whatever. But then the second exercise, it wasn't productive. The longer the session would go on, it should be unproductive, and it was kind of everything was just gone after that first exercise. I felt that was doing too many reps. You know, you read and stuff like that. You were always taught, you know, it was generally 8 to 12 reps was muscle growth and stuff like that. So I kind of tried to stay with it until I came across the Max OT, and I thought, okay, this is saying 4 to 6 repetitions, so I want to try that for a bit. And that was sort of where it clicked. Those lower reps, I was finding that I was able to do a productive session, as well as obviously the less sets as well. So rather than doing 4 sets on flat bench before moving on, I was doing like 2 sets with half the reps. So then my next exercise was still productive. I still had the execution, enough strength and stuff like that. It was kind of just a searching around, because what I was doing, I could feel it wasn't really working for me that well.